I've always said I don't think we should have a cancel culture. I think we should have a counsel culture.
Mm.
I try to have both sides of issues on my platform here and give everybody an opportunity to speak their mind to a limit. I'm not going to have KKK hate mongers on here. That maybe is the other side, but they're going to have to go somewhere else to
Shows have done that.
to talk about that. Yeah, that to me is just sensationalizing, and I'm not going to do that. But there can be two sides of an issue. Even homelessness, there's two sides of the issue. There are those that think home first, and then those think, no, we got to get people earning the right to do this, and I'll have both sides on, and they're very respectful and talk about it. But then there are those who just say, thank you for having me on and talking about this, but I can't understand why you let those people come here and talk about it. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not going to have just you and your side here talking about it. It really comes a lot from young people, college people, that I wonder what they're going to face when they get out there. I wonder if they're going to be coming back to their college saying, I paid you to prepare me and you didn't do it.
That'll be interesting to see. And
Yeah.
It will. And, I think there are a lot of young people too that I see who, there's these issues where their identity marker is something they can't change. And they've had a really negative experience and they do want to feel like someone in a power structure supports them. Sexual assault's a huge one. And sexual assault on college campuses have gone up significantly. There's a great organization called It's On Us that tries to prevent sexual assault. And when I have conversations with, especially young women, the amount of young women who've been sexually harassed by 7th grade is shocking. And we almost normalize it to a point where they're kind of told like, well, this is the society you live in, and this is what you're expected to just stomach or take. So I do think there's this growing hope that for some people, they think like, hey, if I speak up about this, something is going to change. And I think in some ways you're seeing colleges say, yeah, it's going to change. We'll just get rid of these people. But that doesn't change it. That doesn't change their experience of being sexually harassed at such a young age, or having people be sexually assaulted with no consequences. So I'm choosing just a specific issue here. You were talking about political ideology. I think that this is that line between coddling and empowering. I want the students I see to be speaking up and taking action in the ways they are, but it can't go so far where it's taking away someone thinks they're solving the problem, but they're not actually solving the problem. They're not even addressing it.
I had a company called Courtroom Sciences, which was a trial science firm. We would help with trial strategy, do mock trials to test cases. During mock trials, I would often ask to role play the opposing counsel and argue the other side. And we sometimes went through thousands of mock jurors a year in different cases. I found real fast, I didn't really feel prepared for trial until I had learned and argued the other side's case. Let me tell you, everybody has a great case in the conference room, but you get out there in the courtroom and have to defend it and argue the other side. You go, oh, hadn't thought about that. I'd be representing a Fortune 100 company. They're getting sued, and I had to then argue the plaintiff side against them. And only when I learned that did I find out where the rubber really met the road in that case. I would come away saying, I understand their case now better than they do, and they're not making their best arguments, thank God, but I understand it. And I really wonder if we have a generation now that's willing to do that, willing to look at the other side's point of view.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of them are. I think one thing that I see happening, at least, especially in the power dynamics, is there's far more representation of marginalized groups in our society today than ever before. Ever before. What I see happening from people who have privilege and power, they're interpreting representation as oppression to them. You always hear the statement of equality for some people in power or privilege feels like oppression. They don't have equality. these marginalized groups are just getting representation. They don't have equality. And there is a feeling, I think, from privileged and powerful people that this representation is oppression to them, that how dare they have to acknowledge this other marginalized group, whatever it is, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. And so I think to kind of balance what you're saying too, you're seeing this Gen Z have more representation and have more rights than they've had in the past. And some powerful people are treating it as now it's oppressing them. How dare they ask for this? And I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm saying there's a dynamic playing out where representation is feeling like oppression to groups in power. And when you talk about mental health, the mental health of young people who are in these marginalized groups is far worse than people who aren't in it. If you are Black, trans, and lower socioeconomic status, your mental health is going to be much worse than someone else. So I hear what you're saying. I think it all ties together, especially when we're talking about mental health advocacy.
Yeah, if you're in the group you just described, you're double digit at risk compared to the rest of the population.
Yeah. So you talk about what we can do in schools. One thing I do in my classrooms is I'll have students, so we'll put an identity marker on a white piece of paper, a big poster board around the room, and we'll put identity markers on there. So maybe it's by POC or white, male, female, woman, LGBTQIA+, abled, disabled, right? We'll put different identity markers on there. And then on Post-it notes, kids will have to list what is assumptions, stereotypes, or difficult about having that identity marker. And they'll be brutally honest. For white people, it'll be white guilt, whatever it is, or power or privilege, whatever it is. And they go around the room to do all these things. At the end of the class, I'll have them read out everything they wrote. And I'll let them, share what they want. And then I'll ask them, okay, what happens if you have multiple identity markers? Do you think you have higher stress or lower stress than these other people? And then they'll list the identity markers and they'll be like, oh, I guess if I had all these identity markers, my mental health would be far worse. My stress levels would be much higher. So I don't have all the answers to kind of what you're saying. I hear your concerns and I think they're valid, but I think it's also important to have students understand those layers of identity and how it affects your mental health.
Oh, I agree 100%. What I'm saying is we need to prepare them to cope with what they're going to have to deal with when they get into the world. Because it is competitive, and we got to give them the coping skills, not just feed them to the machine, and then they get overwhelmed by all of those demands, judgments, exclusions, or whatever, and they go, I have no coping skills, which is why I was so fascinated by what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think that is what's giving them the opportunity to learn how to not give their power away, how to recognize when they're overwhelmed, raise their hand and ask for the help that they need. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's real.
Yeah.
We can change the world, but in the meantime, you've got to survive in it. That's the key. And we got to prepare them for the next level of life, and that's the next level of life.